Cool. Well, welcome everybody. It looks like we've got quite a few folks here. We're going to get going here in about 30 seconds. We'll just let everyone get settled in, get your popcorn, get whatever you need, really. Whatever you need to get through what we're going through right now. You make it your choice. We are here to enjoy the next, we'll try and keep it within an hour here. We know, Scott, you've probably got tons of places to go right now.
All I have to do is my dog just walked in. That's all I'm doing.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a big deal. That's a big deal right there.
He's old.
Awesome.
All right. I'm ready.
Fantastic. Welcome everybody. I recognize a whole bunch of names here, by the way. So hello to everyone who I know and to everyone who I've never met before. It's awesome to have you here. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking some time out of your day. We are super excited to welcome Scott Mosier back to VFS, kind of, here remotely. Scott graduated from VFS a little while ago, and we were just joking about
when it was all farms. When it was all
just farm, yeah.
Yeah,
we were in a one-room schoolhouse.
There wasn't even film hadn't even been invented yet, so
exactly.
We were really at the beginning.
Yeah, so this talk is going to cover decades here.
Yeah,
we're going to start at the beginning. Well, thank you, Scott, for being here. Thank you so much for taking some time. We're super excited to have you here, and under these kind of unfortunate circumstances, we're able to be together virtually, and hopefully you and your family are doing well down there in Oakland.
Good.
I don't think you need too much introduction. Scott began his professional life here at Vancouver Film School and has gone on to be a real trailblazer along the way. I'm sure some of you will recognize the name Kevin Smith. If you were here a few weeks ago listening to Kevin, Scott's name came up pretty much exclusively all the way through that. So this is the second part of that talk. Scott can tell his side of the of the stories after he probably threw you under the bus a couple times, but that's what friends do.
That's
right?
okay.
So, yeah. So yes, I mean, we could go through your resume and that would take up half the talk. So we won't do that. But we did want to welcome you here. A warm welcome to everyone, and a warm welcome to Scott, as we're going to discuss all kinds of things. But I guess we should start at the beginning in terms of VFS. You are a Vancouver native. You're a Canadian citizen. You're from this area, and you found Vancouver Film School to be your home to at least get things started. We were just joking here before we all logged on about your first foray into filmmaking with Mayday, which was an assignment gone wrong that turned into something really special. So maybe just talk to us a little bit about that experience of being a student at Vancouver Film School and kind of like allowing that to be a foundation and a Kickstarter for you guys.
When I graduated from high school, I actually moved to LA. Was the first thing I did, and I was going to school down there, and I was in like a junior college because my grades were pretty terrible all through my my school career was pretty bad, and because the VFS didn't care, I was like, this is perfect. But I'd gone when I was 18. And I was maybe going to go, and I think you guys had just opened at that point. And then I switched. I'd been in LA for 2 years, and I was tired of being there. So I raced home. Hopped in a car and like drove all the way back, and got back like the day before the orientation. And then the most important thing that happened as far as the career goes is Kevin Smith, for whatever reason, sees an ad in the Village Voice and comes from New Jersey, and we end up in this class together, not particularly taken with each other at the very beginning. I think he thought I looked like Beverly Hills 90210, which is not totally off topic. And I don't know what he looked like because I just hadn't experienced people from New Jersey yet. But we very quickly found each other and knew that we had I think we galvanized first around a sense of humor. Like we just sort of really enjoyed making each other laugh, much to the teacher's chagrin. We actually got called into the office. As I guess it'd be hard to call us grown men, but we were called into the office. for talking too much. But we started there, and then like films, we were talking about Slacker and talking about all kinds of independent films that we'd see together. We also, attending with us. The first day I was there, I actually spoke to Dave Klein, who went on to shoot Clerks, and he just wrapped up the final season of Homeland. So that was sort of the group that was there at Vancouver Film School, and the relationship I had with Kevin was really special, and we ended up I guess winning. I don't know if it's winning, but like the class competed to make the short documentaries, and we had pitched ours, and we'd been awarded a slot, so we were the directors, and it was on a pre-op transsexual, and he who's becoming she. And we had this whole great pitch, and then we shot for one day, and then she wouldn't talk to us afterwards. We didn't do anything. I mean, we didn't do anything. She just sort of, I think she was just like, she's like, this is boring. I think she was bored.
Good first impression.
Yeah. And so then we had to, I remember we went in that weekend because we were shooting, and we talked to the teachers. We're like, well, let us make a movie about it all falling apart. And so the stuff that's of Kevin and I, we're like, we silhouetted ourselves like we were hiding. All that stuff is scripted. Like Kevin wrote all that stuff. Like it was, and then the rest of the interviews were sort of done by, was not scripted. We just sort of interviewed the crew and was like, just tell us how much you don't like us, or how bad, tell us how bad we failed. But it was, I mean, look, it becomes our first collaboration, our second collaboration being Clerks, which the roots of Clerks starts at school. I mean, Kevin, I know he told the story, but Kevin, around the halfway point, the second part of his tuition was due. And by then he'd already told me about, this sort of script he was writing. And so even only halfway through the school, so it was like 4 months, we had already met and sort of agreed to basically go make that movie. I mean, it happened that quickly. And so he left, and then I hung out with Dave a lot, and we did the shorts after that. And then we were supposed to, I think I graduated in October, maybe, or something like that. And then we were supposed to shoot before the end of the year, but there was a big flood. And so Kevin's town in New Jersey was flooded. And so we postponed till March. But, it's always amazing to me that essentially a year after we met, we were shooting that movie in New Jersey. Yeah.
Just off a conversation. Would you say, like, I mean, there's a couple things from that story that I glean. And by the way, May Day is online. It's MAE Day.
Yeah.
On YouTube, it's there. And there's this self-awareness that about yourselves that I think is carried on through your work, especially through the Smodcast and all kinds of things you guys have done since then. Which is, to me, probably the most appealing part of your collaboration, is the fact that it's kind of a wink and a nod to everything. And I think your audience obviously is like, oh, I kind of get these guys. Like, these guys are just me, and they lucked into like making movies and stuff. And I don't think that's probably far from the truth. And it sounds like maybe that independent spirit that you guys had was really just based on being naive about it and just being like, yeah, you're cool, I'm cool, let's go make something.
I think I would say that's 60% right. What I would say, in being able to look back, the truth is like, a large part of what makes that movie, sort of the foundation of what makes that movie successful, is that script.
Right.
And so, for all the other, like, yes, there's an air when you watch it of like, it's just a bunch of friends hanging out, and all of that comes across. And that's how we made it. I remember we specifically, Kevin had said that there was a DP in New York who had a camera package, that he had shot like Laws of Gravity, or I probably got the name of the movie wrong, but he had shot independent films in New York. And I remember we were sort of prepping, and I was like, I don't know if we should do that because like we don't really know anything. And this was it was fear. It was partly my own, just like, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what you're doing. Like, if we bring somebody in who knows what they're doing, like then suddenly that person will dictate how we do things. And I don't think I was that clear about it when I sort of pushed back, but that's when we sort of, I mean, it's not necessarily a nice thing to say about Dave, but like, look, Dave knew he didn't have the experience. We could have hired somebody more experienced, but the truth is that like we figured out through luck also how to create the atmosphere in which we made that movie. Through just pure fear and anxiety of being for people knowing how little we knew. But the thing when I look back is the truth is like Kevin had been writing his whole life, and he'd been so by the time that script comes across, I come across that script, you're in a film, once you're in film school, like everybody's got a script.
Yeah.
So you're knee deep, you're up to your eyeballs in like amateur screenwriting, and people who've writing their first script or trying to write their first script. So when Kevin sends Clerks, or it was called Inconvenience, the first draft I had, I remember I was dolly gripping and editing a short from somebody in another class. Like I had graduated already, and I was just sort of working on the crew to pick up experience. And I was sitting there on set between shots, like reading the script. And it's the difference in what he had done with that script and what everyone else was doing. It's like what he had that is one of the hardest things to do. And it's different for everybody, but it's like Kevin had a voice, and so as much as it was us and we were hanging out and all the rest of it, it's like the element that to me struck the match and started the fire was the fact that like here was a guy who at 21 years old or 22 years old already had a voice, and he had a unique voice. Mm-hmm. And like, I remember because I was trying to write scripts at the same time, and I was like, I stopped, not because I was like anyone that did anything mean, and not that that's a great story about quitting, but I remember just being like, oh wow, like here's somebody who's achieved this. Mm-hmm. By the time he's put in, like he wrote a book, he would write op-eds to like, or he'd write his local paper and argue with like op-ed people. Like he wrote plays. So, he's the solid foundation from which that movie sort of is able to become what it is. And then the rest of us come in and contribute. But my sort of hindsight looking back on it and knowing specifically like finding that voice, finding your own voice, which for me was a much longer timeline. Now I can really recognize it, and I recognize that he had it, and so did everybody else. I mean, it's not like it wasn't a mystery. It's like as soon as that movie starts to come out, like I remember before the movie ever goes to Sundance, the script ends up going to John Pearson, who ends up helping to sell it. But his first reaction was, he's like, I can get you an agent as a writer. Like there was a sense of like, we don't quite know what to do with the movie. It's like, it's sort of in this weird space. It doesn't look that good. but it's funny. And so everyone recognized his writing immediately and recognized the fact that he had a voice.
Right. Would you say that awareness, just on your own specific standpoint, would develop into, like, obviously subsequent films after that, you had developed some sort of working relationship? Did you find that your contribution to that working relationship was really as support and making sure that things like that the ideas that you guys were forming were protected, especially as an independent filmmakers, that maybe just kind of illuminate us on what your role as a producer was along with Kevin?
Well, we were so young. I mean, I was 21 when we made it. And so the first movie didn't count. Like, by the time Clerks is done, it's like, we've made this movie in this sort of amorphous, spontaneous way. It was like, we kind of were pretending like we had titles and stuff, but there was no sort of like, it didn't slide into a normal sort of production. So by the time we make Mallrats, what Kevin does is very specific. And my role is a little more nebulous. And so I started off as a co-producer, and because there's Jim Jackson, Sean Daniels, there's like big producers on it. And by the end, they gave me the producer credit. But then it became for me, because this is my talk. Just kidding.
Exactly.
Then I was really like learning to become a producer on the job. And I remember the line producer, this woman named Laura Greenlee, who, and I didn't even know what a line producer really did. We went to school and then we got out and made a movie, and it was like, I just told her, I was like, I don't understand what fringes are, and I look at this thing, it's all gobbledygook, and I was like, I'm not sure what my job is. And she's like, look, I'll explain as much of this stuff as you want, but she's like, look, part of your job is like you put Kevin in the right space to go make these movies. Like part of it changed over time, but part of those early days was about taking that idea of Clerks, like a bunch of people hanging out making a movie, and trying to like plant that inside of a larger sort of structured Hollywood environment. So it was like we were still trying to maintain that little pod of just like, like just trying to make each other, like even when we were in school, like even when we're on set, it's like you're trying to make each other laugh. Like you're doing your job, but like there's so much sitting around on movies. And so some of it is about keeping things reverent and fun and sort of enjoying ourselves. And then, so Mallrats was kind of like a learning curve of like just sort of starting to understand what a producer is. Chasing Amy becomes the movie where it's like we make it we shoot it for like $250,000. Well, for $210,000, we shoot the whole movie. Wow. But that was like me from that was like my solo producing job. So that became sort of probably more. That solidifies our relationship as a sort of producer director kind of duo. That movie really is like, okay, now I'm going to set the tone for how everything happens because I'm in charge. And then that sort of just is, we're just sort of photocopying that and sort of going on to make the other movies. But my job was, I was the first one to read the script, give him notes. I always had his ear. And, even from that, I'm sure I adopted from the first time we made Clerks, that part of my job was to put Kevin in a space where he could feel like he had the right environment to do what he wanted to do. Like I thought that's what my job, hiring the right people, creating the right environment so he could sort of direct in the way he wanted to direct.
Right. That's amazing. Did you have much of a sense when you were making that? Because like I'm looking back at those films, I think I'm kind of right in the wheelhouse in terms of the market and the kind of people that were watching that and really connecting with it. Because I felt for the first time maybe that people in my generation were making movies for me, which was really cool. And I know there's a lot of measures of success that we could talk about here, but I think for you guys, it was this longevity of just continually doing that and developing, dogma, and you kind of were exploring all kinds of things, but it always just kind of got the sense that's like, oh, if I was just hanging out with these guys, I would just be able to join the conversation because they're talking my language. Was that something that you guys really pushed and really tried to like hone in on?
I mean, my experience of it was not that we didn't think about you specifically.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't get my letters? But, honestly, it's like, it's funny. There's a restaurant. I don't even know if it's still there. I don't even know if the Vancouver, I'm sure you're not in the same building, but we used to go to lunch together and we really just would or we'd go to a coffee shop and we really would just try to make each other laugh. And so, and that sort of idea then became, now it's the podcast, so at the core of our sort of relationship has always been like trying to entertain each other. Yeah. And I think that people pick up on that as like the way they are with their friends. So they're just watching us. So it wasn't that we weren't aware of like the audience, mm-hmm. but it wasn't a self-awareness that we were like, oh, let's do this because that's what it'll feel like. I think it felt like that because we really were just our number one, no matter what we've done, and that's why we've been doing the podcast so long, because I think we still just really enjoyed making each other crack up.
Yeah, just hanging out. And there's just an audience there, yeah. Well, I mean, that's what a great piece of advice is, just make something personal and it'll be personal to other people, right? Because it'll just find that authenticity. Yeah, it's like you can easily overthink everything, and there's plenty of people that will step forward and sort of tell you what audiences want and sort of put everybody in these little boxes. And, we were lucky enough that we kind of just worked for like, what makes us laugh, and then you were just like, threw it out to the world and you're like, hopefully people will laugh along or cry along or whatever you're trying to depict. And I still feel very much that way, that like you do have to, it's also just more fun to honestly sort of come from a place of like, what do I want to see? Like what sort of stories do I want to tell? Like, what do I want to see? What do I think is funny? That to me is the starting point. That should be everybody's starting point, is really just tune into like, because ultimately what you'll learn is like, every time you enter a room, like you are you and you're the best, like you're the person, like you're better at being you than you are at being some sort of like weird amalgamation of like things you've read from books or things you've gleaned from a screenwriting book or whatever. It's like you do have to sort of focus in on like what you really enjoy, like what kind of movies you want to make, what kind of career do you want to have, and sometimes that takes time. Like if you're sitting there going like, you don't know, it's fine. It's like it's an exploration. Because I mean, for me, now that I'm in the later stages of my career, like I loved all the movies we made. I love rated R comedies, but it's not necessarily what I'm pursuing as a director to do that. Like there's sort of other, the sort of movies I want to make now are sort of more connected to, I mean, I wanted to make animated movies and sort of now I'm moving into like wanting to make more like the movies I grew up on. Right. So would you say that, when you started to work with other filmmakers, I mean, one of my favorite movies ever, and the part where I do pump your head up, but, obviously you were involved with Good Will Hunting. With, some people you were probably familiar with, but what that experience obviously became massive and was like the influence on you in terms of going like, well, wait a second, maybe I'm going to start to form my own opinions, move in my own direction, get involved in, like ultimately animation and other types of things. Was Good Will Hunting a part of that process of really kind of like identifying what you wanted?
It was pretty early on. Yeah, this thread won't go that far. Sorry, but no, not really. I mean, look, that movie was like a really special moment of that came through a collaborate meeting Ben on Mallrats, and then sort of um, he was in the process of he was in process of Castle Rock wanting to sell it or fire them when we were on Mallrats. And so we came on board, and honestly, like the main role we filled on that movie was being a sort of, we basically pulled that into Miramax and became a part of like pulling that into Miramax. And then, then it was like, once they hired Gus Van Sant, it's like, what do you need to do?
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to do? Like, we went up to, but it was, it was a great experience, and I love the movie, but like, that was still like, that's pre-Dogma. Like it was still pretty early on. Like it took me, I knew I wanted to direct, I knew I wanted to write, but I don't know if I was waiting for something to really like push me in one direction or the other, but I do remember seeing The Incredibles, and I'd always loved animation from the time I was a kid. But I remember seeing that movie with Kevin. We went to an advanced screening because of Jason Lee was in it. And I just remember kind of walking out and being like, I was like, if that's because it was, to me on one level, it shifted my whole perception of what an animated movie was. It sort of felt more like a live action movie with animated characters. And I also loved The Iron Giant, which I thought had aspects of the same thing. I think Brad Bird's approach is very live action. He doesn't see animation as a genre. He sees it as just like a technique for making movies, which I agree with. And so after Incredibles, like that's when it really got stuck in my head, and then I was like, I really wanted to learn as much as I could about it and go do that.
Right. And then, we arrive here at probably what most people will be familiar with you maybe in terms of recent times is directing The Grinch, which there's a lot of animators here. We all know that that's a long process. That's many years before that comes to. So, was that something you were seeking out specifically, or was that kind of like, hey, let's just go for this and circumstances fall where they are, and your obvious interest in animation was like, yeah, this project matches with where I'm at right now.
My animation path really quickly was, we finished Zach and Miri Make a Porno, and the movie comes out and doesn't do great. It's released on Halloween and all these other things. And I love the movie, and like I was always proud of it. And so I remember there was it was a big disappointment. It was a disappointing sort of end to that. And I remember I was like, no, I'm gonna take a shot at like writing or sort of trying to direct and get into animation. And I kind of made a commitment to myself. I was like, I'm not going to produce. Like, I'm like, the only way I'm going to do this is if I just stop and just focus on writing and doing other stuff. And so I got some work writing on Ultimate Spider-Man. It was on Disney XD, so I started writing some episodes of that. And then I got a call to take over as a producer. But it was a producer on an animated movie it was called Turkeys at the time for Real Effects, and it became Freebirds. And I was friends with Aaron Warner, who produced all the Shreks. And he knew that I had said, like, look, I just would love to sort of get into animation. And he's like, it's been in process. It's 3 months away from layout, which I didn't, I kind of knew, but I didn't really know anything. So I didn't necessarily know exactly the situation I was walking into, which is probably for the best. And so I came on as creative producer because I was like, because it was, to me at that time, I forget the year, now it feels like more, the animation space is much more wide open and there's more, but the chance to be a producer on an animated movie, it's not like Pixar and all these places were hiring, and especially going to hire somebody who's never done it before. So I really just saw it as my opportunity. Like, if I'm ever going to learn how to do this, this is the time to do it. So I jumped in, and it was a tough show, and it was a tough show. It was like the schedule was really compressed, and not a lot of money, lots of things to figure out. And and I'll be honest, when I was done, I was just like, yeah, I don't know if I ever want to make animation again. And so I took some time off, and I was working as an editor, and I was cutting a movie for my friends. And then I got a call from Chris Meledandri because of there's a guy named Brian Lynch who wrote Pets 2, Pets, Minions, and he wrote Hop. So he'd been working at Illumination for a long time. Now, Brian Lynch was from New Jersey, and he was the craft service guy on Chasing Amy. And so I had stayed in touch with Brian for a long time. And, when I was doing the animated, when I was doing Freebirds, we were sort of talking because he was in animation, and we went back and forth. And so that I ended up at Illumination because of Brian. And so then I met with Chris, who we got along really well. And then one day, he was like, the Grinch was like the farthest project out, and they actually needed a producer. It was another producer job. And so, I did tell him, and this is something that's important if you're trying to transition in your career, you have to really always communicate like where you want to be,
right.
so you have to sit in meetings, because I was very like, look, I want to be a director. That's where all this is headed towards. Like, that's my goal. So if I'm taking jobs, it's like, it's with the person having the understanding that that's what I wanted to do. And that was on the table from the first time I met him, where I was like, it's like, I don't know, like, I've produced a lot, and this is what I really want to do. And the Grinch, I was like, is that excitement and anxiety all at the same time, because you're like, I love the Grinch, I grew up on it, and so, which is exciting but also scary, because you're like, how many people, you don't want to be that guy. And look, a lot of people love the movie, and it was such a great experience, but some people do think that. Some people don't like it. Yeah. But I confronted that when I started. I was like, I know there's just going to be people who don't like it because it's not the old one. But so I started as the producer because I was like, I really liked Chris, and I liked the team, and it was with a bigger studio, and so I started on that. And then, animation projects are long. I was ultimately on it for 4 years, and somewhere around the middle of that time, there was a choice to move me up to director. And then I so once I got moved into that job, and I directed a short. I remember I directed a short for Sing that was on the DVD. And then the other shorts came up, and I was really just like, I like making movies, I really want to make a long form movie. And so then everything sort of switched, and I got brought in and became one of the directors with Yarrow Cheney, who's super talented, insane, one of the most insane artists in the world, just to watch him draw. And And so then, yeah, my wife and I moved to Paris. And then, so I was on the movie for, yeah, like 4 years. 4 years. So I did basically, I did return to animation. And I love it. I do love it. And like, very quickly, like right now I'm sort of pursuing both. Like, I've sort of arrived at a place where I'm like, I made live action movies with Kevin. I've made documentaries. I've sort of explored, um, I've explored a lot of it. And now I'm sort of at the age, I'll be 50 soon. And I'm like, I kind of just want to do it all, and kind of have be working in all those spaces at the same time.
For sure. Well, you've got all these tools in the toolbox, and like you said,
Yeah.
They're not genres. It's just tools that you can use to express whatever ideas you can attach yourself to or your own, right?
Yeah, the world of distribution has blurred now too, where it's like it's almost just it's all storytelling now,
Right.
and there's it's not everything sort of delineated, and like there's just buyers that are making documentaries or docu-series or series or like now there's movies, and then there's just like I know that there's I've heard of things where it's like they're gonna make projects that are like movies that are like 2 or 3 episode movie. Like the whole thing is just opened up so wide that like it's pretty exciting. I find it exciting.
Yeah, well, it's like a Wild West. It's almost back to that independent spirit, except it's just independent in terms of like a lot of things are possible now, whereas before everything seemed like it was boxed in, right? So, well, we will definitely get to some questions here. We got some questions coming in already, and just for all of you there at home, if you have a question, there's a Q&A button there for sure. We'll try and get to some of them here. But I did want to my final question would be, and hopefully this is some advice for everybody, is a lot of your stories here are peppered with a guy I knew, a person I worked with, this lady who helped me here. Like maybe just talk a bit about the network that you've built and what that means, especially as you're moving forward and kind of carving out your own path here on sort of the maybe the golden part of your career where you get to kind of make some decisions here and lean on that network. Maybe just kind of give some folks here some advice on how to curate that.
One of my rules is like I keep in touch with a lot of people. Mm-hmm. and like my network idea is just like if I'm interested in people or I like people, and I don't like networking sort of creates networking. Like if you sit around and you don't worry about the people you're in class with right now. I mean, look at me, like my whole career starts in just that moment of meeting Kevin. Like we basically meet and create and then Dave Klein's there. And so then I pull him in, and then, at that point, it's like, as much as if there's people sitting there, if there's people listening who are just like, they hate the part of networking. And I have plenty of friends down here who hate they hate networking. They hate this idea of like schmoozing and all the rest of it. And, I think it's like any other part of the business, you can define how you do that, like just the terminology. Like I don't really network and I don't really schmooze, but what I do is stay aware of all the people I'm coming in contact with and the people that I respond to or we have good conversations, I keep in touch with, and some of those moments never bear fruit in the sense of like, oh, I get a job off of it, but I also am not done. So I don't know, like, and sometimes, the point is like, the more people you know, the more people you can know, it's exponential. So it's like, if you know one person and that's it, then they might only know one person. But if you know 5 people and then they know 5 people, and it doesn't mean you need to go out and party all the time, you do all this stuff. But what it means is like, over the course of your career, the idea that, I mean, this is really like a life thing too. It's just like, if you go around determining who has value and who doesn't, you could make some really bad, you can make some bad mistakes.
Right.
It's like, be open, like, look, the Grinch job is like, once again, like I was just, he was the craft and then I'd read Brian's scripts but I liked Brian. Like, if I hated Brian's scripts and I didn't like Brian, then that probably wouldn't have happened, because I wouldn't have stayed in touch with them. So, it's good to have a network of people. It's also good, just as somebody working in the business, it's like, you look, I mean, maybe we shouldn't be this way, but like, I'm in the business, I got movies all the time.
Right.
Like that, we're not necessarily that much fun at dinner tables when there's too many of us, because we just sort of, destroy the whatever sort of like normal conversation that exists. But, it's really, really important to create contacts and be in touch with people. And once again, like, it can be, you can be loose about it. Like, I don't remember ever being like super like I didn't have a chart on the wall where I was like, and then I know that person, and then get to that person. Like, I didn't even have a plan. I just knew that, like, I knew the people I liked, and I stayed in touch with them. And I still do it to this day. Like, I still talk to people that I'm like, I know I'll never make a movie with them. I know that I can't sort of, it's like, I know that sort of vein of my sort of network will never sort of go anywhere. But I just think, it's like, I always say, like, work begets work. Like, this business can feel that way. People work, and then they suddenly, especially like, in live action, and like, you'll go through these droughts. And, when I stopped after Zach and Miri, I really was just like, I'm just going to start taking whatever job I can get. Like, I'll write this, like, I'll just do things for free or do whatever. And I've watched friends in the business who, like, they get to a certain place and are like, they're just like, no, like, they don't want to go backwards. And then ultimately they always find out, it's like, just start working, start talking to people. And like, the more you do that, the next thing you know, you're in conversations that you didn't imagine you would be in. And you do have to, like, and I'm, just so everyone knows, like, I'm a pretty introverted person. And it took me, over time, I've sort of managed to, and it's not even like come out of my shell. I'm still a very introverted person. I just understand that, like, I've made the deal with myself, just like, if I want this, if I want to go out and pitch my stories and get, like, I have to sort of figure out how to be this other person when I need to be in order to get what I want.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said about just telling people what you wanted to do. It's like, hey, yeah, I would like to direct one day. And someone's like, all right, let's go.
Oh yeah. You have to, like, it's well, especially like for me, it was like, I was a producer and I went back to the world and everyone was just like, what do you want to do now? And they're like, and it's like that, throw your hat over the wall. I was like, I'm just going to say what I want to do. And you force that person to look at you from a different, you force people to look at you that way, or associate you, I guess is the better term. Like, force people to associate you with being a director. And look, maybe most of them will forget the moment you walk out the door, which I'm sure some of them did. They're like, he's a producer. And then, but like, there's, maybe there was one or two that sort of did consider it. And that's the, just plant those seeds.
Yeah. You just need one person to go, yeah, I wonder what a Scott Mosier film would look like.
Yeah, exactly. And like, look, the Grinch was like, I jumped on as producer. I'm a very hands-on creative producer. And it was through that process of producing that, on one level, I proved to the powers that be that I was capable of doing that job, like, because of sort of what I was able to do.
Nice. Well, and if you're introverted, then you're perfect for animation, really, because we all just like to stare at our computers all day. So.
Oh, I know. And like, look, it's something to really know about yourself. Like, it truly is. Like, if you want to be in this business, and at the burning at your core is that you want to tell a story, the specific story. It's like, unless you're willing to step outside of your comfort zone, then you'll just be the person sitting at his desk, like bitching about all the people who have gone on to make a movie. You know, it doesn't come to you.
Right.
I just told a story of like, I didn't want to be in animation, and then Chris Mandel and Dodger called me. That's a sort of different thing. It's like you have, if you want something specific, you do really have to be prepared to be like, you know, to sacrifice to do it. And once again, like if you are introverted, which for me is like, look, pitching is a performance.
Right.
You just have to think about it that way, which is like, you're not sort of, pitching is a performance. It's something that you know, like Kevin is a natural performer. You know, you turn mics on and he like goes, and I can do that a little bit too. But when I'm pitching, like I'm generally like, I know what I'm going in to pitch, and I haven't rehearsed it in the sense that like I'm on script where I'm not, but it's like what I've done is I've sort of absorbed it in such a way that I can really just sort of do like a performance.
Right.
And if you associate it as something where it's like, it's not about you going in and pitching, it's about the version of you that needs to go in and pitch. You just need to find who that person is.
Right, and connect. Well, when we were talking a couple of weeks ago, you mentioned about, you know, getting notes and just feeling around where people weren't responding to, and then just adjusting your performance for the next pitch. Much like any rehearsal would be like,
yeah. Yeah, like pitching. I mean, sometimes when you pitch, you also go to places that you know they won't buy it. Like if you have a list of places you're going to go and there's like a couple where you're like, either you don't want to work with them or you don't think they'll buy it. Like they're good spaces to, you know, kind of rehearse or like go.
Try on the shoes.
Yeah, but you know, I've done pitches where if I'm pitching over the course of a week, it's like between every pitch, I'm basically looking through my notes and, you know, scratching off jokes that died or like, when did people seem to lose like patience or attention, or, you know, you're constantly sort of reforming it as it goes, as a performance, you know?
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. That's fantastic advice. Well, I think we've got a few questions I can see kind of coming in here. So maybe I won't be so selfish and I'll let somebody else ask a question here. So we got a few. We'll kind of get through some here. We've got about 20-25 minutes here. Hopefully we can get through most of them. But Philip, kind of kick us off here. He says, Kevin often talks about how Slacker was the movie that heavily influenced him. What was your Slacker? What film or story did you really connect with, you know, to get you going?
It's kind of like a couple of movies. Although Raiders of the Lost Ark was like a huge movie for me. Like that was a movie that I was also just like old enough to sort of like associate that it was a movie and that it was an actual job that people do. So it was like in that sweet spot where I was like, I was super, I loved that movie and I was at the right age and Time Bandits.
Oh yeah.
Which was sort of like, Time Bandits sort of preceded it. So I saw it as a kid and I didn't necessarily go like, oh, I want to make movies, but I remember seeing it after as I got older. And like, I just always, you know, the list is so, it's funny, like Kevin has this like definitive moment where mine feels like just a series of like, a series of different movies at different times. You know, like I can tell you that I can't say what I'm working on right now, but I can say that the thing I am working on right now was from watching a movie. You know, I was like a movie from when I was a kid. I rewatched a movie and I was sort of, suddenly I was inspired on what I wanted to do next. So it's like, I feel like, you know, it's part of why I love movies is just like, they constantly give, you know, like there's always, you get a lot from it. So, but I would say the movie that like, I think the movie I saw the first time I ever uttered the words, I want to make movies, was Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Right. It's funny. Like I'm kind of the same way. If students ask me that question, it's always like it's just a collective, and it almost seems inevitable that I would be here in this moment, right? Like it was never
Yeah.
like that was the thunderclap. It was just like, but looking back on it, you kind of realize hindsight's 2020. You're like, oh, that was, I was questioning that. Now with my mature eyes or relatively mature,
Yeah.
you can look at it going, that was the moment, right? Rather than in that moment, you weren't thinking that necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, look, I just mentioned The Incredibles, which diverts my career in a whole other direction. So it's like for me, it's been a series of like epiphanies of like, oh wow, like now I want to do that. I mean, my career is kind of all over the map. Like I have been, and now I feel like I actually am. I was always meant to like. I just love making a lot of different kinds of stuff, and so now I'm thankfully at this age where it's like I have the potential to do that, and I realize now like that's what I was always working towards.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I was always like I was like, oh, I wasn't trying to do one thing. What I wanted to do was sort of like just immerse myself in the world and sort of just play with all the different forms and formats that you can do
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
movies and animation and series and whatnot.
Definitely. Well, this next question is kind of connected to this, and I think I know the answer to this, but having, because this question was asked kind of at the beginning and when we started talking, but Miles asks, would you recommend making your own film after film school or to just try and get a job in the industry first?
Well, that's where, that's a very personal, you're going to have to look in the mirror, man, and like answer that for yourself because, Kevin was, and it wasn't that I wasn't ready to help him make a movie. Like, I think I was equipped to do that movie well. We partnered really well, but like I, I was not meant to make a movie right when I got out of the business.
Right.
I had no business doing that. Like what? So I got lucky and I met somebody who was like had a voice and knew what he wanted to do. And I think that's where you have to. That's what you need to learn about yourself. Like if you're not ready, if you don't have anything to say, to be honest, like that's the thing. If you don't have anything to say right now, it doesn't mean you're defective. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. But if you don't have anything specific on your mind right now, then just start working and start learning, because like for me, it took me a long time to get to a place, but now I have 25, 26, oh God, years of experience that I can put behind whatever I want to do. And that was the process that I needed. So I would say, you're going to have to, that's a question you'll have to answer for yourself.
Yeah. You gotta look deep. That's a deep cut right there.
Yeah.
You gotta man up on that one there, Miles. Great question though. Rico well, first of all, he's going to compliment you. Hi, Scott. First, I want to say thank you for Dogma. That film was a huge influence in my work and my life. You're welcome, Rico, to take words out.
Thank you.
And actually, his question is great. It's a great question, Rico. Very topical. Apart from the pandemic, what are new developments in the industry that worry you, and some that you're excited about?
I mean, this is a sort of probably more personal philosophy also, which is, I just want to make things I'm excited about.
Yeah.
So I tend to look at the business through that lens where I'm like, there's a lot of opportunity to do that now.
Mm.
It's a harder world to get people's attention when you do that. Like there's more opportunities to make stuff, but there's, the world is being fed a lot of media all the time. And so attention is really the hardest part now. But I'm excited about the opportunity that the world is making so much kind of content too. And then we have access to all these voices that, are from all over the world and they're getting an opportunity. And so I'm excited about, technology. Like I think that my worry is that from all of that, the excitement, my only worry with it is actually that people are not taking enough time to sort of make the best thing that they can. That there's a sort of like, it's like if you're really hungry, you make dinner really fast, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best dinner you've ever made. So I think that there's I get a little bit worried about a pace, that the content world is pretty voracious, which is exciting because you go like, oh, there's all these opportunities. But I'm more the person who's like, well, but let's, can't we make it at this pace where we can sort of be a little bit more thoughtful about what we're doing? So it's it's the good side and the bad side of it.
Right. Ali's got a question here, and I'm going to kind of hack the question a bit because it's a good question, which is, what do you do between movies? And my add-on to that is like, what do you generally get inspired by? Like, what are you seeking out, and what kind of keeps you going?
Between movies, I read a lot. I read a lot of books, like comic books, graphic novels, and I read a lot of books. I tend not to read a ton of scripts. I watch enough. I watch a lot of movies. I watch series. I'm always doing that. And so reading scripts to me is like, once you kind of understand the formatting stuff, like I kind of let that go, because books to me are much more, they're not bound by the same restrictions that movies are, like narratively or anything like that. Like books can sort of like be plotting and slower and take their time. But by doing it, I think what you absorb is just like, you can really watch people develop characters in slow motion, which is a little bit different from movies. But I think you can take all that information and which basically the answer is like, between movies, I think about movies. I try to come up with ideas. I usually take my wife on a really amazing vacation if I can, just to sort of make sure that, and I do rest. I do take some time, but when I take them off, I read. And when I was finishing The Grinch, I really was like asking that, and take time to reflect and say like, what do I want to do? I mean, especially now that I'm almost 50, I'm like, I know that that's not old, but it is something where, what do I want to do? Like, there's a little bit more urgency to me in like the movies I'm going to make over the next 10 years. So, I sort of really think about that. And then I just relax and hang out with friends. But it doesn't really turn off. Like, it's weird. Like, what do I do between movies? Like, sort of like start thinking about other movies. Like, it's sort of, there's no sort of lull to it. It feels pretty constant.
Right. We got time for, a few more questions here. And this one stuck out to me actually, is Paul Donnett. Greetings from one Centennial grad to another, class of 88.
Oh, nice. I was 89.
There you go.
I was 1 year before. He was the year before me.
Maybe he stared you down in the hallway and you didn't even know it yet. That's an old 80s movie cliche. Worked with your sister at the Story Institute here in Vancouver too. There you go. Wow. You guys are like best friends.
Yeah.
So the question is a good one though. And this may be more of a general kind of, because there's a few questions here, by the way, about pitching. So maybe we'll kind of try to catch this in one, but what are your thoughts on pitching to Netflix or Amazon versus major film studios? Someone else has actually Catherine asked about like the difference between pitching animation and live action. So maybe like, do you need to switch hats a little bit when you're pitching, or is it just straight about the idea?
It does depend. Like if you're doing so animation is obviously, it depends. I mean, you can pitch it without artwork and stuff, but you're competing against a bunch of people that are bringing in artwork and visuals and stuff like that. It's like animation can also be a little bit different. It doesn't have to be, because of animation, you are somewhat more pitching a concept, like because there's so much of the story done over the course of making the movie. live action, I feel a little bit more like I kind of have to pitch, you know, the actual like sort of story from front to back. But I'll say that like the one thing that goes across all these, no matter what you're pitching, and as far as like Netflix or Amazon or the studios, like I don't know. I mean, you maybe you'll get some inside information about like, oh, they want something that's slightly more like this, so don't say this word or that word. You might get coached on that, but generally speaking, it's like it's the same thing. The main thing is like, if you're going to go in and pitch something, there's a few. One of the key ingredients is like, how do you personalize what you're doing? Like, how do you enter the pitch and say like, so I am pitching this idea and I am the only person who can make this. And this is why, you know, because of this. You know, even if you're pitching like a high concept idea, you need to find the personal reason why you see this thing and like you see it very clearly. Like when you're pitching, you're trying to fill the people who are going to put up the money with the confidence that you are like, that you got it, like you got it, and that you're connected to it. And so if you have an idea and you have something you want to pitch, it's like, look, if you don't have an idea, I would also say like start with something personal, you know, find something personal. And it doesn't have to be exact, like it's not like you have to tell your life, but like, you know, what is something that means something to you? Like, and you can start from there to build your idea, even if your idea is in space and there are bugs or whatever all the elements are. Start from something personal. And then when you're pitching, and I've seen this, I say it because I've seen it, it's like, if people feel like it's your movie or your series or your anything, even if they don't buy it, like you at least did your job, which is you sort of convince them that yes, you are the person to make this, that this is your idea and you are the person who should be given a chance to express it. And right. It could be simple where it's like, you could tell a story about space and bugs, you know, but there's an element of that story that relates to, I was pitching a show and, you know, one of the words I was talking about was wonder and fear. You know, like when you're 12 years old, you live in this cycle of wonder and fear where it's like, you're brave and excited, but you're also still scared. You don't know the world. And it was kind of a theme in the show. And then I was like, you know, and I recalled a story. I was hiking with my father in Washington, and we saw bear tracks. And it was the first time I saw like fresh, I mean, there was bear poop and then there was bear tracks. So it was like, there was a bear very close by. And it was it was a moment of like wonder and fear where I was like, you know, I really wanted to see a bear, but I was also completely like, what the F are we going to do if we see a bear? Yeah. And those are like little, like, look, that's a genuine thing that happened to me. And like, those are things that a lot of people, when they pitch, don't understand that, you know, it's like finding that sort of personal attachment to what you're pitching is really like almost half the battle. I mean, you have to have a good idea too.
That's got to be a
decent... you have to have a good idea, you know, that's in the right space. But I've been fortunate that like things that I've pitched lately that have gotten picked up, it's like, I wouldn't say that I was chasing any sort of like particular, like people really want, you know, beach movies. Like everybody wants the beach, you know, like I still come from that place of like, you know, find out what gets you excited. Because otherwise, like, why do it?
Yeah.
Like find out what gets you excited, because then when you go pitch it, you'll be excited. Find personal attachment to it. And those are the main things. Even if it's an animated movie and you don't have artwork, it's like if you can convince all these people that, you know, you do have to have a good idea, But if you could really express it and be energetic and excited and passionate and it's personal, then they go like, okay, let's give that person a bunch of money to do it because that energy is what they're going to bring to the project.
So it's like really trying to make the idea not exclusive from yourself. Like it should be connected to the point where it's like, it's inevitable that this idea has to come with you and it's going to be birthed and authored and made by you.
Yeah, it's like you have to, it can't be something you bring, you know, and sit next to you like this. It's like, in this thing over here, like, it's great, isn't it? It's like, it has to be like, you know, you rip open your chest and it's like aliens, like your idea just spurts out all over the audience. But yeah, that's the thing. That is the biggest thing I've learned over 25 years is that being clever is not as useful as being passionate. You know, like you can sort of look, if you have clever ideas that you can be clever, like do both.
Well, that should be on a t-shirt or on your business card. Well, there's a question here that I think goes in part with that because you're talking so personally about ideas and stuff. But Nicholas asks what the experience was like on the Grinch when you're actually working with another director who might have his own take on the film.
You know, with working with Yarrow was, you know, I was trying to figure out how it would go, but we basically very quickly, we would kind of get together in the morning and talk about new ideas and collaborate. And, you know, we've pretty quickly found we were on the same page. And it's like not every single detail. I mean, it's not like every single detail we were in total agreement, but like we sort of knew each other's strengths. So there was stuff where I was like going, you know, there's stuff that he does really well and that he's great at that I knew audiences would love that I'm not necessarily like, that's not necessarily my forte. And there's things that I might do that's a little bit out of his wheelhouse. And so, but we, as a core idea, like we generally like got along pretty well about like the sort of core big ideas of what the movie was. And it was pretty painless. We did not sort of, it was, you know, it's like making an animated movie though too, is just like, it's, you know, the studio is like, you know, is a bigger presence than on a live action movie. You know, when you go shoot a live action movie, you're very contained and the pace is so fast that it's like, you know, with animation, it's like, you know, every decision takes place over a long period of time. And, you know, the immediacy only arrives at the end. Once a shot can't make it through the pipeline. And then everybody, you know, then you watch people make decisions super fast.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just other ideas coming at you all the time. But I guess sometimes that's, you know, working with another director, even some of the tension sometimes can help because you'll arrive at a third idea that maybe, you know, you hadn't come up with. So I would imagine that would be even just like you and Kevin working together at some point, there's a tension point where it's like, okay, well, we have to make a decision. Let's come up with the third point, which wouldn't be ours.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's easier with Kevin because it was like, you know, it was always like, here are my ideas. But he was a director. So he would, with your, we kind of like, you know, once you have that big conversation at the beginning, like my thing is like fighting about the details is where you have to get over yourself.
Right.
It's really just like if him and I couldn't decide on the larger idea of what the movie was about, like that would have been a problem, or that would have been much harder to do. Like the detail stuff is like half the time, like I'd be like, hey, what about this? He's like, great. And he'd be like, hey, what if we do this? I'm like, great. You know, it was pretty easy going. But, you know, you have to make sure before any of that started happening, we sat down and have had enough conversations to know that like we weren't like on the completely opposite sides of the room on the thing. So
yeah, it's important to like start off on at least on the track where you guys know you're going to end up in a similar location
and know each other's strengths. Like Yarrow's worked in animation his whole life. He's an incredible artist. You know, he had worked on the Lorax. So he was very steeped in Seussian sort of design language and all the rest of that stuff. So it wasn't like I stepped in and I was just like keep going like, well, you know, that's not the way he does S curves and stuff like that. I was like, you know, I knew when to sort of like, we both knew kind of like where we came from. And that was part of the discussion too, of like, you know, because a lot of times you have multiple directors, because when things really get going and the pipeline's like firing and production's on all cylinders, it's hard to sort of, you know, that's when I look at like people like Brad Bird and people who like, it's a lot, you know, it's a lot to do in a day. And we were on a slightly compressed schedule. So it's like, there's just no way we could be in the same room at the same time all the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. They're big machines, animated films.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got just a few more minutes here, and maybe we can end on a more romantic question here from,
okay,
this is a good
someone
one.
Proposing.
Yeah, man. You didn't
Not
know
to me. I thought somebody might be proposing to somebody else.
Yeah, you've inspired people. It says, hey, Scott, with the amount of hats you've worn in the industry, if you had an unlimited budget and complete creative control, what kind of project do you think you'd create? So like, what's your like crazy dream project, without maybe going into details, because maybe you're heading in that direction?
You know, all I can say is that like I'm trying to do that right now, but I can't say what it is. So we could take another question, because I totally took a giant shit on the romantic question.
Yeah, like, by the way, I guess that's a good answer, because at least you're like, well, you know, 10 years from now, it's like, it's happening right now. So you couldn't have had a better answer, which is, I'm going to try and make that happen.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, when I finished Grinch, I was like, what am I going to do now? And I was like, and I'm like, I've been doing this a long time. And I was like, this is the time for me to just try to do exactly what I wanted to do. And, you know, I'm in process. It's not guaranteed to happen yet, but, you know, it's what I'm sort of fighting to do right now. And, you know, I'm excited, hopefully, to be able to share the news this year about what it is. But yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Awesome.
And we can ask a couple more questions too, if we want.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, that's like I said, I can imagine a better answer, which is like, yeah, I'm just gonna freaking do it right now, and then you'll have to find out about it later.
Yeah.
And I'll let you know when it's my dream project. Well, I guess, I mean, there's a classic question here, and maybe this would be a good way to kind of wrap it up. Is and this is maybe just, you could say this to all the students, but in this case, Mia's asking, hey Scott, do you have any advice for upcoming BFS film production students? Any sort of like advice? I mean, we've given us a lot of great stuff here, Scott. Anything else? Any sort of nuggets of truth or things to look out for, or, you know, maybe even especially heading into this kind of new normal that we're all going to be working towards? Is there any advice in the new way of making things for film production students?
Well, what I'll say about like what's happening with the COVID and all that stuff, what I would say is it's so in process. In a weird way, it's like I wouldn't think about it. Like there are so many people being paid a lot of money to try to figure out what all that is going to be, and it's not no one has drawn a diagram and is passing it around. Like it's a sort of ongoing discussion. And you know, as time goes by, it's going to alter. So, you know, my advice to people is like, I wouldn't overthink on that, especially right now. You're in school. Like really what you need to do is, depending on what it is you want to do, you need to get as much time and experience doing that thing as possible. So you're at school. If you want to be an animator, you want to, whatever the specific thing is your goal, for now, you can change your goal. You can be an animator and then try to be a director. You can do whatever you want, but whatever you want to do, don't necessarily worry about like a business and how it's going to shift and trying to anticipate, you know, because it's like, I have access to, but I honestly don't listen. Like my thing is just like, just tell me when to pull up the blind, what the new view is, and we can get going. I do think that, like, you know, I always remember I was working on an animated movie, and this could be bad advice, but I'll say it anyways. I was working on Freebirds, and I remember there was OT, and we had to, like, everyone was working OT, and it was crunch time. And some people were like, no, I'm not doing it, because it's voluntary. You don't have to come in on the weekends. And the people that were coming in on the weekends were like, they were kind of grousing about the fact that they had to come in on the weekends, but other people weren't. And, all I said to them is like, when this movie's done, you'll have put in, it's not just about like, well, I showed team spirit and all the rest of stuff. It's like, it's not about that. What it's about is when the movie's done, you put in another 1,000 hours over that person, and you're a better animator. Like, you're a better animator. And so if you do it over the course of 2 movies, and once again, like, I'm not necessarily advocating for the fact that the business makes us work hours that I generally think can get really ridiculous. So I want to couch that answer with like, I'm not like, don't go crazy and live your life and like have hobbies but know this, that if your desire is to be the best animator in the world, then you are competing against a bunch of people who are going to be spending every waking hour doing it. So, it really depends on your goals. And that's like coming to school. It's like, what's your goal? If your goal is to learn and see if you want to do it as a career, because you're just sort of like, maybe I don't want to do it, or maybe I do, then you should spend your time in school with that in mind, that you're there to explore what it means and to see if you like it, and then like leave when it's done, or like go do something else. But if you're like, I've been wanting to do this since I was, then, and those people, look, the one thing that I do know is like, those people end up doing it pretty naturally.
Yeah.
You end up sort of putting in the time. But I'm not a great artist. I can draw a little bit. And so I remember after Zach and Miri, I started going to like life sketching classes down in LA. And it was like, but it's LA, right? So it's in the valley. So it's like I'm in the room, and the guy who directed like Lion King is in the, like, there's like some super like, and I'm sitting there going like, oh, like I doodled in high school and stuff. And all I remember was sitting there and going like, at a certain point, I was like, oh my God, I'm terrible. And that guy's so good. And at a certain point, it was like I almost imagined like little like bubbles over their heads that had the amount of hours that they'd been doing it. And I was suddenly like, could see all the people in this room and their drawing and their abilities, and just understanding that it's like, you really want to be as good as that guy or that girl or whoever in front of you, then like you have to put in the kind of time and dedication that person has put in. I mean, it is part of like the life of the arts, is like, there's some crazy people who just work and do that stuff constantly. And so you do have to know, like, those are the people you're up against,
Yeah. Well, even just watching the Michael Jordan documentary over the last few weeks, it's like that guy worked harder than anybody else.
Oh yeah. Like, and he got better than everybody else out of just like pure, I mean, there's drive, but, experience is, especially like if you were an animator, I can't animate a shot, but like your ability to animate and be really good comes down to getting faster. You get faster at doing it. You gain instincts. You just sort of don't spend like an hour doing this thing that will never work. And so like, for me, if it's your passion, if you want to do something really bad, it's like, then, once again, like, I'm not advocating for, don't do it till you're miserable, but it's like, if you love it, like, then just dig in.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to put in the hours in a purposeful way and make sure that you're not stopping if that's really, really what you want to do.
Yeah. Like, look, the people who work the hardest the people who work the hardest and put in the time, especially like animation is is a skill, right? Like there's natural ability and like, but it's also like a skill. It's a developed skill. A lot of things in this business are a developed skill. If you want to be a production person, right, then the developed skill is how do you manage artists, right? So if you're in school right now, surrounded by a bunch of like people, like, you know, introverted artists and stuff, like, hey, that's an opportunity to be like, you have to motivate those people. Like that's part of the job. Like there's skills involved in doing all of this.
Right.
And so, you know, depending on what you want to do, like understand what that skill set is, and then just sort of throw yourself into it.
Throw yourself into it. That's it, into the deep end, like we said at the beginning. So
yeah.
Well, that's awesome. You know, you've been really generous with your time. You've been generous with your advice. On a selfish standpoint, I've learned a lot from you just talking with you today. So I really appreciate this. And you know, we at the film school, obviously we've got thousands and thousands of graduates, and we measure success in many different ways, but just, you know, your ability to just be in this business for so long, and just like, honestly, my relationship with the industry is like, it's just a miracle that you can make movies. Like, it's just so cool that you made something, right? And that you got to make one and a third and a fifth and a 10th. And so, you know, we as a school just congratulate you for that success. And certainly wish you all the best here as we navigate the future. And certainly we would love to do this again, but let's try and time it so that we can all be in the same room together.
I'd love it. I'd love it. Thank you guys all. I know that like I'm grateful, you know, when you say like having had the opportunity to do what I've done and to continue to do it is like, you know, I make sure to, I'm extremely grateful to be in the place I'm in and able to sort of have the opportunity. And I'm grateful to have been able to speak with everybody. And I hope that it was helpful.
Definitely.
And I look forward to coming up there.
Yeah, we'll got to get you back to, got to do the tour of the old cafe, you know, the old haunts and Centennial, because apparently they're waiting for you there, man.
Actually, we'll just go, like my friends and I own Main Street Brewery. So I'm just going to go there.
It's a meet Scott event.
Yeah. There you go. Perfect.
Awesome, man. Well, look, again, thanks again so much. Stay well, stay safe, and we look forward to
everybody. Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye.